Hey everybody, Handsome Aaron here, and I just watched Dune, the 2021 movie. And by I just watched Dune, I mean I just watched Dune Part 1. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. I didn't know that going into the movie. I talked to other people, they didn't know that going into the movie, but I'm actually pretty upset right now, having just finished watched it, because yeah, this is the first of what is apparently going to be at least two movies. And the marketing does not tell you that. The title of the movie doesn't tell you that. If you're like me and you find that out when you sit down to watch the movie, you're going to be pretty annoyed. So let me just tell you that right out of the gates. First thing I have to say about this. Okay? So it's really irritating. I'm quite cross right now, actually. Um, but um, Dune, I have never seen the 1985, I think, Dune, the one made by David Lynch. Never seen that. I've never read the book or books. I know nothing about Dune other than there were sandworms in it, and there were sandworms in this movie too. So I knew that was gonna happen. Uh, so Dune is I unlike all my other videos, Dune is actually kind of new, so I don't want to really do spoilers. It's like a sci-fi, actiony kind of movie. It's sci-fi like fantasy. It's got like fantasy elements. People fight with swords, and there's like an empire, and uh, I mean there can be empires in science fiction, but people fight with swords, and there's like people with magical powers, really vague magical powers. The movie does not stress itself out with explaining what the deal is with that. There even seems to be multiple different kinds of like space wizards. There are these chicks that can like read minds and control people, and then like another character can fly for some reason. They just having never read the books and knowing nothing about the series, it does feel like the books probably have a lot of world building that this movie just in a 2.5 hour runtime couldn't do. Um, it sounds like I'm complaining. Actually, I think the world building in this movie is really good. It's basically about this character named Paul. He's the only one whose name I remember, so everyone else I'm just going to refer to by titles and stuff. So it's Paul, his dad, who looks like General Grant, like he's about to go fight at Gettysburg, and his mom, and they go to this planet called Dune, I assume, and run the planet for a while, and then some shit happens. I'm actually gonna not run really through the plot. Um, the movie's pretty good. Let me say that. I like the movie. It's just my natural instinct to complain about things. I'm pretty sure I like the movie, even though the ending left me, and I think it's going to leave a lot of people pretty upset, pretty unsatisfied. Because the movie doesn't have a proper ending. It genuinely feels like they wrote a 5 hour script, and then just wherever the midpoint was, they just cut it in half there, and that's where they ended this first film. Um, because it just does not have a real ending. It ends in such a way that it feels like it could have ended like at any point in the last like 15 minutes, and it would have left you feeling exactly the same. Anyway, they go to this planet, and they're all fighting over something called spice. And spice is basically it's basically identical to unobtainium in Avatar. I realized it's like a MacGuffin in the form of a natural resource. Like, they tell you vaguely that they need it for their spaceships to work, but they don't really explain that, and you know for a fact that it can't possibly be true that they need this stuff for their spaceships, because otherwise they couldn't have possibly come to this planet in the first place. So, it's pretty unspecific. It's just a MacGuffin in the form of, yeah, it's just like someone took the Infinity Stones from Marvel and like mashed them all up, and then sprinkled the powder over the desert to make a whole MacGuffin planet. Um, but that's what they're all fighting over vaguely. And the movie is is pretty good. Like I said, there's a lot of good like character stuff. There's a lot of good performances. Bootstrap Bill is the antagonist. It's great. Um, Paul's Civil War dad is really great. I like his mom. Paul and his mom kind of reminded me of Caitlin Stark and Robb Stark in Game of Thrones. Although Khal Drogo is in it, so I might have just been in a Game of Thrones mindset when he showed up. Um, uh, things look really nice. I mean, like the movie looks beautiful. There's a lot of cool ideas in it. Uh, there's like these shields that everyone has that I think is like a really neat looking. They're really neat looking, although they're pretty inconsistent. But uh, there's so the movie is basically divided in half. There's the first half where they're kind of getting to the planet, setting everything up. Then there's a pretty clear midpoint. I'm not going to say what it is because spoilers. And then the second half, and they're very clearly divided and they're very distinct. The first half of the movie and the second half. What I'm going to say is that first half of the movie, which is like the boring half. It's and on paper it's the boring half where they're just like establishing everything, explaining these like great houses, explaining the politics of it. And they're just kind of like governing the Dune planet. That half of the movie is really good. And I was super into it, and I actually just wanted to watch more of them running this planet. I would have, and just like understanding, like the magic. I talked about the magic, and it's like I'm almost a little frustrated about understanding the magic so little because I was really interested in it, and that first half was really drawing me in to wanting to understand this world. And I think it was just fun to watch them kind of playing politics and all these different characters that I liked, and the performances were all really good and them interacting. And then the second half of the movie, on paper, sounds like the more fun part because it's more Paul and his mom running around having more of like an adventure. And that half was really started to drag. I and it's where I started to really feel the 2.5 hour runtime. Obviously, the second half of the movie is where you're gonna feel the runtime, but I think it was partially just because like I was not nearly as interested in the second half where it's just Paul and his mom. I think partially because yeah, all the interesting world building from the first half basically stops at that point. Even though there is more world to explore, and I'd like to know and understand more, it just kind of stops doing that in the second half to be more of an adventure. And I also think that not all, but a lot of the more interesting characters aren't in the second half either. You're mostly left with Paul, and some people might like Paul. He might speak to somebody. I think he's okay. He's probably the least interesting character in the movie of the characters that do anything. There's a couple other. Drax is in it. I think that's his name. The guy from Guardians. I think the character's name is Drax. But he doesn't really do anything. He's not really a character. And then there's this other chick. Her like opening narration is what starts the movie, and the guy has Paul has these like little visions of her, but she doesn't really actually do anything in this movie either. It almost feels like it would have been. I almost feel like it would have been better if it didn't start with narration from that woman, and it didn't present her as being important from the beginning if she wasn't going to do anything in this movie. And it could have almost been a reveal when it turns out that she is real. I mean, as people watching the movie, we know she's real, whether or not she opens the movie with her narration or not. But it's still. Anyway, so the people that aren't really much of characters, obviously Paul's more interesting than them, but Paul just isn't that interesting to me. He's more the kind of guy that's interesting because of things that he has, like his magical powers, and things that happen to him, like the events of the movie, rather than anything that's interesting about like him as a person. Again, that's me. You might like him. I just found him to be not all that interesting. Actually, there's another character that's not all that interesting either, other than the fact that he seems to just kind of disappear at some point. It's like his mentor, trainer guy, Paul's. And I don't think we ever find out what happens to him. He just stops being in the movie at some point. So yeah, anyway, that's my thought, is that the first half of the movie is all the more interesting world-building stuff, and then once, like, I don't know, the plot gets started, it actually, well, not the plot, but what's supposed to be the more fun stuff gets started, you slowly lose interest, at least I did. Yeah, the antagonist of this thing is actually the best character, I think, of the whole thing. It's Bootstrap Bill, and every scene he's in is great. Um, yeah, what else is there? There's a few things I didn't like, and because I'm me, I can't help but focus on those. There's this one... Okay, so this is a bit of a minor spoiler. I'll be as vague as I can. There is a betrayal in the movie. Not going to say more than that. There is a betrayal, and it's handled really poorly. And because I don't want any kind of spoilers, I can't really say any specificity, but I feel like you could easily have written the betrayal out, and I would have liked it more, because the whole betrayal thing feels really clunky and lame. There's... See, I almost want... Another problem I have is that there's a big point made in that first half of the movie, and an important part of it, they talk about this a lot, is how kind of screwed their situation is. That all their machines are breaking down, that they can't possibly harvest enough spice to make this operation work. We get this slightly pointless but fun action scene that's kind of all about how screwed their situation is. But then events kind of happen that feel like they would have happened regardless, and none of that ends up mattering. When that halfway point comes and everything kind of changes, all that stuff, which is a considerable amount of time and focus of the movie, instantly stops mattering, and it feels like that would have happened regardless of whether or not they were making a profit on the spice. And additionally, I get the feeling that the amount of time that they spend on the planet before everything changes is probably supposed to have been a while. I get the feeling that in, like, the book, it probably, depending on how close this follows the book, I don't know. But I get the feeling that Paul and his family are probably supposed to have been on this planet for a good while before everything goes crazy. But in the movie, it kind of feels like they've only been there a couple of days, and it makes everything happening in the first half feel really pointless, and like... I don't want to say too much about what's happening, but if you watch it, and I like the movie, so I recommend that you do, just keep that in mind, that, like, if you think about it, that this is all happening over the course of, like, a week, which it kind of feels like it does, it's like, well, then why did these guys do this? Why did all of this happen? Why did any of this matter? So that's a problem I have. And again, if they had spent more time in that first half, kind of more developing things and doing more of the world building, the movie might have felt slower, might have felt like nothing's really happening, but it also would have addressed that problem too, made it really feel like some more time is passing. I think my conclusion is that this movie should have been, speaking of Game of Thrones, an HBO series. I think you could have done that. Had a whole episode, have them not even get to the Dune planet to like the second episode. Have a full hour where they're just on their home world hanging out, and then like 3 or 4 full episodes where they are Paul and his family, his father, are just governing this planet and dealing with various problems. And you could have all the world building to explain all the great houses and the politics and the magic and the culture of the Fremens, the natives to the Dune planet, and then have the big crazy episode where everything changes, and then have the second half. The second half, I think, then might, well, no, because then you could just tell the whole story. Actually, now that I think about it, if they're going to do this whole story in 2.5 hour long movies, then you could do the whole thing in like 10 1-hour episodes and really take your time with it. And I think that actually would have made for a better story. So yeah, in conclusion, well, not in conclusion, you get my general feelings on this. The ending, the fact that this almost doesn't have an ending, that this is, it is not a movie that will get a sequel that will wrap it up. This is the first half of a 5-hour long movie. It doesn't feel complete at all. This is not the kind of movie that... There are movies where it's like incomplete, but is like fine. Like Star Wars. Because that's what I kind of do on the channel, I guess. Not really, but I can sit down and I can watch like episode 5 of Star Wars and really enjoy it, even though it's not, and not feel like now I need to watch episode 6. Episode 5 doesn't conclude the story, but I don't really need to watch episode 6 because 5 is self-contained enough. This is not that situation at all. I just feel like I watched half a movie. So be aware of that. So, oh, one more note I do want to give. This movie does something that I've never seen any other movie do, or even really even try to do, which is it makes the deserts feel majestic. You like never see that, especially like a desert planet in a sci-fi story. They're always just desolate wastelands. They're just shit. And this movie is also just a big desert. Like the kind of desert that I don't think in real life people even live in. Not every desert is just like giant rolling dunes. Like there's better and there's more and less hostile deserts, and this whole planet just looks like the most inhospitable. There's like no plant life. I don't think humans could actually survive here. Like natively, like if you came from space and brought supplies, you could. But I getting real nitpicky. I certainly don't think that the sandworms are a creature that could ever fucking actually survive in that ecosystem. Even ignoring the idea that creatures probably can't be that big, like in any, even in sci-fi. But it's like, what the fuck do these things eat to survive, to be that big? Because nothing seems to live in this desert. Even the human tribes, the Fremens, don't have like herds of animals that they like move around. They don't seem to. They just seem to wander the desert. It's like, what do these guys eat? Anyway, I'm getting off track. The desert feels beautiful, and that's and important, and that's an accomplishment. I've never seen anyone even try that, but they pull it off. The desert feels like something that you get why the Fremens think of as like this wonderful place. But in terms of the movie, I said I do recommend you watch this movie, and I'm gonna put almost a little caveat there. What I honestly recommend you do, and this is an odd recommendation, is you should assume that enough other people will watch this movie that it will get a sequel, and then wait until they announce that sequel, and then watch this movie. And then you'll only have to wait a little while to watch the second half. because I'm almost irritated that I'm gonna have to wait like 2 years to see the end of this, because that's what it feels like. It feels like I watched half a movie. Um, but it does say something that the movie probably was doing a very good job at engaging me. That I am upset that I have to wait so long to see the second half. Um, if I wasn't really that into it, then I probably wouldn't have cared that it ended so anticlimactically. So that's kind of my recommendation, I guess. Watch the movie, but honestly, maybe wait like a year and a half to watch the movie. Wait till the trailers for the second one start coming out to watch it. But if you don't want to do that, I get it. And if you do just want to watch it now, then I'd recommend it. But just be aware. I guess I'm not good at concluding these things.